$3,000, 550. Same pair of binoculars, to your eye, in the field, for the animal you're trying to find. The Zeiss Victory SF costs $2,999. The Maven C3 costs $550. And the gap between them is not what you think you're paying for. Here's the part that should stop you. The person who lives on that difference, the hunting guide who spends the whole season with his eye pressed to the glass, whose whole job is spotting the animal before his client does, that man is not carrying the $3,000 pair. He's carrying cheap glass. The guy who has every reason to buy the best, and every dollar riding on seeing clearly, looked at the expensive one and walked away. The weekend hunter buys the $3,000 badge. The professional doesn't. Sit with that for a second, because it flips the whole thing on its head. Because there's a word for what you're paying, and it isn't quality. It's a tax. A prestige tax. And once you see how it's assembled, piece by piece, you can't unsee it, and you'll never look at that locked case the same way again. Here's where I earn that, because it's a big claim, and I'm going to back every inch of it. I'll show you exactly where the expensive one wins, because it does win, in one specific place, and I'm not going to hide it from you. But the reviewers who test these things side by side, in daylight, at the ranges you hunt, keep landing on the same word: comparable. One of them costs more than 5 times the other, and the honest verdict from the people who measure glass for a living is comparable. And the Zeiss isn't even the top of the case. A Swarovski NL Pure runs $3,200, a Leica Noctivid $34. So the real gap isn't $2,400, it's closer to $3,000. That's the number this whole video is about, what that $3,000 is quietly buying, on top of a pair that already does the job. I know how that sounds. It sounds like the guy on the forum who bought the cheap pair and needs to feel okay about it. So I'm not going to ask you to take my word for any of it. Every number in this video comes from the company's own websites, from reviewers who put the glass on a bench, and from hunters who ran both pairs in the field and wrote down what they saw. Where something is a tester's opinion, I'll call it an opinion. Where it's a price you can check today. That's the deal. I spent years behind a sporting goods counter. I sold the glass in the locked case, the stuff we kept a key for, and I want to be straight about who I am, because it changes what you should trust in the next 20 minutes. I'm not an engineer. I never ground a lens. I never sat in a lab measuring light transmission, and I'm not going to stand here and pretend I did. What I did was stand at the counter and watch 2 kinds of hunter walk out the door. One walked out with a $3,000 badge. The other walked out with glass that did the job and kept the difference in his pocket. This video is about the wall between those 2 men, and who built it, and why it was built on purpose. Now, let me tell you where this is not the story you've already heard from me, because if I don't kill this idea up front, the whole thing falls apart. If you've been around this channel, you've heard me talk about the logo tax, a stack of rifle scopes rolling off the same Japanese assembly line, wearing different names, priced a rung apart. Same tube, same glass, 3 logos, 3 prices. That is not what's happening here. I need you to understand that, because if I let you believe the European alphas and the cheap American brands come out of the same building, I'd be lying to you. And a lie is the one thing this channel can't afford to sell. They do not come out of the same building. Swarovski builds its glass in Absam, Austria, and has since 1949. It's one of the last optics makers in Europe that does everything under its own roof. The research, the production, the assembly, none of it outsourced. Zeiss builds its top binoculars in Germany and Portugal. Leica builds the Noctivid in its own factory. These are real European factories making real European glass, by hand, in-house. Nobody is rebadging anybody. There is no shared assembly line hiding under these 3 names. And the cheap brands, Maven is a company out of Lander, Wyoming. Their better glass gets its key components from Japan and gets assembled in a facility in San Diego. The Japanese optical house that makes a lot of this glass, Kamakura Koki, a name you've never seen because it's never on the barrel, supplies a big slice of the mid to high binocular market worldwide, everybody from the direct brands to names you'd recognize. Different glass from the Austrians, different factories, different continents. So this is not same factory, different sticker. If it were, I'd have said so in the first minute, and we'd be done. Which makes the puzzle sharper, not softer. If they're not the same glass, if the Zeiss really is built by hand in Austria, and the Maven really is a different animal from a different ocean, then why do the people who test them for a living keep telling you the cheap one is enough? That's the part worth your evening. Not, they're secretly the same. They're not. It's, they're honestly different, and the difference still doesn't reach you. Stay with me, because before this is over, I'm going to tell you exactly which binocular to buy, at which price, and the one situation where I'd look you in the eye and tell you to spend the $3,000. Start with the money, because the money is where the trick begins. There's a way a binocular normally gets to you. A brand makes it, sells it to a distributor, the distributor sells it to a shop, and the shop sells it to you. Every hand in that chain takes a cut, and the last cut, the retail cut, is not small. Maven, the Wyoming company, says it out loud on their own website. Most companies use the traditional retail model, and that means a markup of around 50% gets added to the item at the retail level. 50%. That's their number, their words, about the industry they're undercutting. Another one of these direct brands, Tract, started by two men who used to work at Nikon, says the same thing in plainer math. On their own site, they tell you that if their binocular went through a retailer, you'd probably pay $930 or more. Instead, buying straight from them, you pay $664. That's the retail markup, named and subtracted by the very people subtracting it. So that's the first layer of the tax, and I'll be fair, it's the honest layer. It isn't villainy, it's just distribution. When you buy a binocular in a shop, a real chunk of the price is the shop existing, the building, the lights, the staff, the guy with the key to the case. That guy was me, for years. Cutting out the shop cuts out that money. Nothing sinister about it. But that layer alone does not get you to a $2,400 gap, and this is where people stop thinking too early. Removing a 50% retail markup turns a $900 binocular into a $600 one. It does not, by itself, explain why the thing in the locked case costs $3,000. Something else is stacked on top of the glass. And that something is the part they can't print a line item for, because you'd never agree to pay it if they did. It's the name. It's the heritage. It's Austria since 1949. It's made in Germany, stamped into the barrel. It's the little bird on the housing that another hunter recognizes across a parking lot before he's close enough to say hello. That's the second layer, and it's the expensive one, and it is sold to you deliberately, with a straight face. Swarovski will tell you themselves what they're selling, if you read their marketing the way a marketer writes it. Making their products in Absam, they say, is part of their identity. They're committed to the location, committed to their roots. Hear that for what it is. That is not a spec sheet. That is not a light transmission figure. That is a story. A place, a lineage, a 75-year pedigree, sold to you as a reason the number on the tag is correct. And the story is good. It might even be true. Austrian craftsman, Alpine Precision, a company perfecting one thing since before your father was born. I'm not mocking it. I'm telling you it has a price, and the price is most of the money sitting on top of the cheap glass. So here's the reveal, the single thing that ties the whole scheme together. You are being sold two completely different products wearing the same shape. One of them is a light gathering tube, the other one is a badge, and the industry has gotten very good at charging you tube prices for the badge. The glass in front of your eye does one job. It finds the animal. The name on the barrel does a different job. It tells the other man at the trailhead what you can afford. When you hand over $3,000, only part of that is buying performance. The rest is buying membership in a club, and the club meets at dawn in a parking lot where everyone glances at everyone else's neck strap. Now, I'd have no way to prove any of that to you. It would just be me talking, a retail guy with a grudge. Except the people who test glass for a living have already done the measuring, so let me hand you what they found, because this is the part that decides what you buy. Outdoor Gear Lab put the expensive Zeiss up against a Vortex that costs about a quarter as much and put both on a bench. Their verdict, and I'll give you the number because the number is the whole argument. The Zeiss is the best model on the market. They said that plainly. And the Vortex still offers roughly 80% of the performance for about a quarter of the price. 80% of the best glass made for 25 cents on the dollar. Now, I want to flag what that is. 80% is a reviewer's judgment, not a law of physics. It's a summary of a lot of careful looking. but it comes from an outfit that measures light on a bench. And 80 for 25 is the shape of this entire market compressed into one sentence. And here's the part that should make you laugh, or wince, depending on your mood. When they put a meter on the two of them, the cheaper glass measured brighter on the bench. The expensive one is the better binocular overall. Resolution, color, the way the whole image holds together. But the raw light number didn't crown the $3,000 pair, which tells you the premium you're paying isn't one clean speck you can point at. It's a bundle of small refinements, most of which live at the very edge of what a human eye can register in the field. Field and Stream, testing binoculars specifically for hunters, put it even blunter. Their editor wrote that the average hunter has to strain to see the difference between the very best glass and the merely very good glass that costs half as much or less. Strain. That's the verb, from a man who tests optics for a living and has no reason to talk down the expensive stuff. And the same magazine points out something that should stick with you. Plenty of working hunting guides, people who are out there every single day of the season, whose eyes are their paycheck, run cheap binoculars. $200, $300. A guide glassing mule deer in Colorado with a $270 pair, not because they can't afford better, because the cheap glass gets the job done, and a guide spends his money where it actually moves the hunt. That's the case against the tax, in one breath. You are paying a 5 times premium for a difference that the people who test glass for a living have to strain to see. Now, I owe you the other side, because if I stop there, I'm running the same play the marketers run. One clean story, all the inconvenient parts swept under the rug. And there is an inconvenient part. So here it is, straight, no flinching, the best case for spending the $3,000. The expensive glass wins, in one place, and it happens to be a place that matters to some of you more than to anyone else watching. Low light, the last 20 minutes of legal shooting light, and the first 20 of the morning. Dawn and dusk, when the animal finally moves and the light is almost gone. A tester at Rockslide, that's a western backcountry hunting site, serious people, not bird watchers, put a Zeiss against a Maven and watched what happened as the light died out of the sky. His words, and I'll keep them short, the Mavens went noticeably grayer in tint in really low light than the Zeiss did. Leaves in distant trees stayed distinguishable longer through the Zeiss. He scored the Zeiss a perfect 10 on glass, and the Maven an 8. And then, here's the honest part, the part I respect him for. He said that for most people, that difference probably is not worth the price, but it was there. He saw it with his own eyes. In the exact light that matters most to a hunter, the expensive glass pulled ahead. And there's a second place the premium earns its keep, and this one isn't about the image at all. It's about your face. Put a binocular on a tripod and spend 4 hours behind it, picking apart a sagebrush basin for the one antler tip that gives a bedded buck away. That same tester set it flat. Over a long day on the glass, the differences aren't minimal, they're profound. The premium glass is easier on your eyes, less strain, fewer headaches, and the edge of the image stays sharp when the cheaper glass starts to smear and blur out at the rim. If your hunt is you, a tripod, and half a day of staring into the distance, the expensive pair earns some of its money back in the muscles around your eyes and the headache you don't get at noon. And you don't have to take that from a magazine. Go read the backcountry forums, the places where Western hunters argue about this stuff for pages. Rockslide, Hunt Talk. You'll find the same split, over and over, from people spending their own money. One man writes that he glasses the same animals as his buddies carrying Swarovskis, that he originally paid $1,300 for his and they're $1,800 now, and that the extra $700 just wasn't worth it to him. I can't verify his eyesight or his hunt. It's one hunter's report, but it's a report you'll find echoed 100 times over. And because I promised you the other side stays on the table, you'll also find the opposite. A hunter who admits the cheap glass looks great to his eye but says he's constantly adjusting it, that it never sits quite right on his face, and that he sometimes regrets not going with the Swaro. That's a real complaint too. Notice what it's about though. It's not about the image, it's about the feel, the fit, the comfort over a long sit, which is exactly the seam we're pulling on. So, who is the $3,000 for? It's for the mountain hunter who glasses for hours in the worst light of the day, every day, for a week straight, whose entire hunt is finding an animal a mile off before it finds him. For that man, in that light, over that many hours, the premium is real, and I'm not going to take it away from him. If that is genuinely you, Spend the money and don't look back. But be honest with yourself about whether that's really you, because the marketing is counting on you flattering yourself here. For most hunters, most of the time, the man who glasses a field edge for 20 minutes at last light, the man hunting mostly inside 400 yards, the man who lifts his binoculars a few dozen times across a whole season, that low light, long session edge is a difference he's paying 5 times over for and actually touching twice a year. You're buying a race car to drive to church on Sunday. It will do it beautifully. You just never needed it to, and the dealer knew that when he sold it to you. And I want to be just as fair to the cheap side, because cheap is always better is exactly as lazy a story as the one I'm tearing down, and I'm not going to trade one lazy story for another. It is not always better. Not all budget glass competes. Maven's own C-Line, the $550 pair, the price I opened this whole thing with, they call it mid-range themselves. It's assembled overseas from a mix of Japanese and Chinese components. It's very good for the money, but it is not the pair sneaking up on a Swarovski in the last light of the day. Their spotting scope in that same budget tier, by the accounts of the backcountry guys who've run it hard, does not hang with the Austrian glass when the light drops. So don't hear me saying the cheapest thing on the shelf beats the best thing in the case. The pair that hangs with the alphas is a step up. Maven's B-Line, the Japanese glass assembled here in the States, the $1,100 binocular, not the $501. The right cheap thing gets you most of the way for a fraction. The wrong cheap thing is just cheap. Know which one you're reaching for. Which brings me to the one question you actually came here to have answered. Forget the theory. What do I buy? Here's what I'd tell you across the counter. And this is the part I could not say out loud when I worked retail, because the $3,000 pair in the locked case was paying the store's rent, and my job was to sell it to you, not to explain it. Don't buy the badge. Don't buy the bird on the housing. And don't buy the flag on the box, either. And I mean that. Stay with me for 30 more seconds, because I'm about to name an American company, and I do not want you to walk away thinking the lesson is buy American. That would just be trading a European prestige tax for a patriotic one. Same trick, different hat, and I'd be insulting you. Here's the actual reason, and it has nothing to do with the flag. There's a company called Maven, out of Lander, Wyoming, family run. They sell direct, no shop, no distributor, no 50% retail cut sitting on top of the glass. Their better binoculars use Japanese optics, the same caliber of Japanese glass that ends up in a lot of names you respect, and they are honest about that on their own website. They do not tell you it's made in America because the glass isn't, and I am not going to stand here and tell you it is. That was the whole point of this video. Don't let anyone sell you a country of origin as if it were a speck. What is American about Maven is the company, the people in Wyoming who answer the phone when you call, the lifetime warranty they actually honor, no receipt, no runaround, the program where they'll mail you the binoculars to look through in your own hunting light before you commit a dime. You are not buying a flag. You are buying a company that took the middleman's cut off the price and put its name on the warranty instead of on your ego. And it happens to be a company that lives in Wyoming and picks up the phone. That's the whole turn, and I want it clean in your head. Not American glass is better. Nobody in this price range makes the glass in America, and anyone who tells you different is just selling you a different flag. The turn is, buy from the people who cut out the markup and stand behind the glass with a real warranty and a real phone number, instead of the people who charge you for a badge and a story about a town in Austria. The European Alpha sells you a heritage and a bird on the housing. The Wyoming company sells you the glass and a person who answers. For the hunter who isn't spending half his life on a tripod in the dark, that is the better deal, and it is not close. So here's where we land. $3,000 and $550. 2 binoculars that, in daylight, at the range you actually hunt, the experts who test glass for a living have to strain to tell apart. The gap between them is not glass. It's a retail markup you were never required to pay, stacked underneath a heritage story you're paying for whether you asked for it or not. The expensive pair genuinely wins in the last light of the day and over a long, cold morning on the tripod. And if that's your hunt, buy it and wear it proudly, you earned it. But for everyone else, the tax is optional. And now you know exactly how it's built, which means you know exactly how to stop paying it. The name on the barrel tells the other man at the trailhead what you can afford. The glass tells you where the animal is standing. Only one of those was ever worth $3,000, and it was never the one they were charging you for. If this changed how you'll look at that locked glass case the next time you walk past it, do me one favor and subscribe. This channel does one thing. It audits the gear so you don't have to trust the man whose paycheck depends on selling it to you. And tell me down in the comments, what's the most you've ever spent on glass? And looking back honestly, was it the light you were buying or was it the badge? I read every single one. Next time you're standing in front of that case, you'll see two price tags, and you'll know which one is the tube and which one is the tax.